read Revelation.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is February 19th. Welcome to the podcast. So, got about 35 stories to get through, so let's get started. I'm going to have a follow-up on the Zizian cult. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Kash Patel getting out of committee, what that means after securing a key Senate vote. So it looks like he's on the road for confirmation, but let's not start sucking each other's dicks just yet. All right, let's get into the headlines for today, February 19th. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a follow-up here on the Zizian cult. And so the Zizian cult is a violent cult of transgender young people in their 20s and 30s who are responsible for 6 murders. And they have been described as a vegan cult, which is neither here nor there. It's like saying that these individuals are all left-handed. Them being vegan has nothing to do with their strange behavior and cult. First of all, I want to drop in the idea, because when we're looking at reason, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, you have to play the what if game. What if you know your history, and let's say you know the intelligence services, the CIA, had been involved in cults like the People's Temple, and also it has been bantied about that the CIA was involved in Charles Manson. Is this another helter-skelter operation using witting or unwitting participants like the Zizians, with a new focal point being transgenderism? Is the mental illness of transgenderism responsible for the violence? Well, not really. So we're going to have to get a little bit into philosophy, so let's think about doing that. So what was reported early and now has left the reports of this Zizian cult is that they were, or they are, followers of rationalist thought. Yet in the early reports, they said they protested outside the Rationalist Federation or Association, the Association of Rationalists in the United States. So the Zizians were rationalists, but they didn't agree with mainstream rationalism. This has to do with basic philosophy. I've talked a lot about this in regards to what postmodernism is. Now, postmodern, one of the pillars of postmodernism is subjective thought. So what you believe is your reality, sort of thing. So subjectivism is a big part of transgenderism because it's part of gender expression. So if you subjectively think you're a woman, then you want to put on dresses and act like a woman, behave like a woman. But that doesn't mean you're a woman, because objectively people can look at you, and even science, biology could say that you're not a woman. What goes further into this is rationalization. And so let's get into, I don't put any credence in Wikipedia, but just for the exercise, we're going to read from Wikipedia. The Wikipedia states, in philosophy, rationalism is the epistemological, view that regards reason as the chief source and test of knowledge. The position that reason has precedence over other ways of acquiring knowledge, often in contrast to other possible sources of knowledge such as faith, tradition, or sensory experience. And that's the most important one, sensory experience. More formally, rationalism is defined as a methodology or a theory in which the criterion of truth is not sensory but intellectual and deductive. And that's the most important thing we have to understand about that. What I was trying to say yesterday that I couldn't spit out is that the opposite of rationalism is empiricism. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. So let's go back to the Wikipedia. Rationalists, let me just say something, that rationalists like René Descartes emphasize that knowledge is primarily innate, and intellect the inner faculty of the human mind, and therefore directly grasp or derive logical truths. On the other hand, empiricists, which is the opposite of rationalism, empiricism, like John Locke, who, if you enjoy America and its freedoms, you could thank John Locke specifically. He is the one that outlined the philosophies that were adopted by the founding fathers. Empiricists like John Locke emphasize that the knowledge is not primarily innate and is best gained by careful observation of the physical world, the natural world, outside the mind, namely through sensory experience. You see and study, therefore you acquire knowledge. Rationalists believe, and they assert, that certain principles exist in logic, mathematics, ethics, and metaphysics that are so fundamentally true that denying them causes one to fall into contradiction. The rationalists had such a high confidence in reason that empirical proof and physical evidence were regarded as unnecessary. All right, that's a lot to digest, but what I'm suggesting here is the connection between transgenderism and postmodern thought and rationalism, which postmodern thought adheres to. Is though if you're sitting on your couch and you could deduce that I'm a woman because I think, therefore I am. I think I'm a woman, therefore I am a woman, which was, I think, therefore I am, was Descartes' famous phrase. But going on to historize, since the Enlightenment, rationalism is usually associated with the introduction of mathematical methods into philosophy, as seen in the works of Descartes, Leibniz, and Spinoza. This is commonly called continental rationalism because it was predominant in the continental schools of Europe, whereas Britain's empiricism dominated. And that's John Locke was a Brit. And really, to understand the United States and Britain and freedom, really, and understand the deep state, you should read John Locke. Also, Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, which was published 100 years before John Locke. Goes on to say, even then, the distinctions between rationalists and empiricists was drawn at a later period and would not have been recognized by philosophers involved. Also, the distinction between the two philosophies is not as clear-cut as sometimes suggests. For example, Descartes and Locke have similar views about the nature of human ideas. So, as I often said from my Buddhist philosophy, is you always walk the middle path, which is moderate path, centrist path, is that therefore you don't become extremist or be tied to your idea, to the extreme nature of your idea, because if you're bound to your idea to such, or your ideology to such an extent, you could be pulled further and further into the extreme. Realistically, there is empiricism, which states the obvious. You go out and you look. How do I know it's a sunny day outside? You go out and look, and that way you know. You could also deduce, if you're sitting in a dark room, that, well, it's been raining for 3 days, so it's probably sunny today, whatever. But realistically, empiricism and rationalism coexist. There is the intellectual deductive mind, but there is also the perceptive mind. So when we talk about these things, we can understand that sometimes it's good to deduce and sometimes it's good to observe. Sometimes your perception can fail you, and sometimes your reason can fail you also. I don't think some of the rationalists would agree with that, but that is indeed the truth. And finally, in political usage and politics, rationalism, since the Enlightenment, historically emphasized a politics of reason centered upon rationality, deontology, utilitarianism, secularism, and irreligion, specifically secularism. The philosophical usage, rationalism, is often contrasted with empiricism. Often, very broadly, these views are not mutually exclusive, since on some definitions, a philosopher can both be rationalist and empiricist, as I just mentioned. Taken to the extremes, the empiricist views hold that the ideas come to us a posteriori, that is to say, through experience, either through the external senses or through such inner sensations as pain and gratification. The empiricist essentially believes that knowledge is based on or derived directly from experience. The rationalist believes we come to knowledge through a priori, through the use of knowledge, and is thus independent of sensory experience. In other words, as Galen Strawson put it, you can see that it is true just by lying on your couch. You don't have to get up off your couch or go outside and examine the way things are in the physical world. You don't have to do any science. Exactly. So you wouldn't have to study chromosomes in a transgender person to see that they're not a woman, because they don't want to look at that. They declare, therefore they are. All right, moving on to other headlines for today. Breaking news, Fox News. Trump FBI director nominee Kash Patel picks up support from key GOP Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, says he'll vote to confirm Kash Patel. Now, we also have to watch here for any malfeasance. So basically saying, oh, I think I'm going to vote for him, and then at the last minute vote otherwise. Is that unlikely under a Trump administration? People are trying to curry favor with the president, so we'll have to see about that. Hold on one second. I am missing another story. Excuse me. One American News reports U.S. Senate advances Trump's FBI nominee Kash Patel before anticipated confirmation. What they're basically talking about here is since Kash Patel got that, well, seemed to secure, or they whipped Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, it seems that he's clearing his committee. So he will, they haven't announced that specifically yet, that he will be out of committee, which means they secured enough votes, and so they should bring him to a vote. So I thought he came out of committee last week. So if he comes out of committee, there's a curing period before the vote. So the curing period is just to make sure that everybody is of clear mind and made their decisions and stick to them before they call the vote. And they just, right before they call the vote, they go, is everybody in the same position they were a few days ago? So it looks like they won't have the vote for confirmation until next week, because it's already Wednesday, so they don't count weekend days, although they did work the weekend to confirm some of the earlier picks. So if they're in a rush, which I would hope they would be, to confirm Kash Patel, he could be confirmed on the weekend, but it looks like it's going to be early next week. BJ Media is reporting Trump purges DOJ of Biden U.S. attorneys. Now, what we do know is that 60% of the Justice Department, or the Department of Justice in the United States, is the ranks are filled with Democrats. So almost 3/4 of the people employed by the Justice Department are known Democrats, registered as Democrat Party voters. So the Justice Department is replete with liberals, much more than any other department. So Trump purges the last of the Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys, and this is good. Should he purge all the liberals? I don't know. They're supposed to be objective or bipartisan or nonpartisan when they prosecute crime. Now, is that going to be the case? It's hard to say. He learned a lot from his first term, so enemies are enemies. And the media goes on about, oh, Trump needs loyalty and all this stuff. He needs not to be persecuted because he could have got so much more done in his first term if he wasn't under constant attack. And although the facade of resistance, or it was a facade, is gone because the majority of the electorate support Trump and what he's doing. So it's kind of hard to say everybody hates Trump when they never really all hated Trump, but that's what they used to spread the propaganda to the blue Kool-Aid drinking liberals. Just the News is reporting Trump signs executive order aimed at making IVF more affordable. That's good. One American News reports, this is a big one, DOGE reports $4.7 trillion in untraceable treasury payments, missing a critical tracking code. What does this mean? This means what we knew about fraud schemes, widespread or large fraud schemes, not the welfare mother using her grandmother's name to get a little extra Social Security. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the American taxpayer being bilked by people the government knows are getting the money. Because otherwise they would have sent up a red flag. But they didn't. They were sending out unlabeled, we don't know who got the money, untraceable payments in the trillions of dollars to people. Whom? That's not the welfare mom scamming. And we're going to get into more about what the grift was in a second. Postmillennial is reporting DOGE seeks access to Social Security IRS data as top officials resign. DOGE will continue to shine a light on the fraud they uncover. And what is in this story? According to the Washington Post, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Michelle King, resigned from her role as she clashed with Musk over him and DOGE staff gaining access to sensitive Social Security records. So what? The fact is that they're going to have to see Social Security numbers and all sorts of other things to do their work. That doesn't mean they're going to use those Social Security numbers to sell them or to commit fraud or to do anything else. I mean, you have to trust the auditors that they're not going to use the information they access for nefarious purpose or criminal purpose. Now, you might have seen the interview with Sean Hannity and Trump and Musk. It was fairly enlightening. The fact that it wasn't reported on other media is ridiculous, because what we know is that anything, or DOGE and Elon Musk are at the center of most news coverage lately. And the fact that there is an interview, who cares if it's by Fox, with Elon Musk and the president at the same time, why other mainstream media outlets wouldn't cover it. Like, the conservative media covers Margaret Brennan talking with, Marco Rubio or JD Vance or whomever. Why wouldn't the mainstream media cover Sean Hannity talking with Trump and Elon? Because they're in the middle of news. And it would clarify some points of view for people if that were the case, but it's not the case. So, let's see. New York Post reports on this. Elon Musk compares Trump derangement syndrome to rabies in Sit Down with President. I used to be adored by the left. And as I mentioned, if you didn't see the interview, it was okay. Sean Hannity is not a hard-hitting journalist asking the real questions. A lot of them were softballs, but whatever. But he did cut to the chase, at least things that were in the news recently. That was pretty funny to see Elon Musk gesticulate about Trump derangement syndrome. But what he did say is that the fact that people become so irrational, and I've witnessed this with my brother quite a bit, is that if he sees a red hat, he goes berserk. In the middle of a restaurant, he'll start screaming, "Oh no, oh no, oh." And then it turns out to be like, a Ralph Lauren hat or something. And he feels like an idiot. It was just a red hat and he freaked out. Getting some clipping here. So I tried something different with the audio here, and I don't know why it's clipping. Let's see. All right, next story from the Federalist. Even Trump-hating judge Tanya Chutkan knows DOGE lawsuits are dogs. And what are they talking about here? The Obama-nominated judge rejected an urgent filing from more than a dozen leftist state attorneys general attempting to stop DOGE. And who are these people? These are liberals in different states. Now, the federalist system is important, but you can't sue the federal government for doing the federal government's work. So they're suing to stop, like I said, It follows the money. If you, in the federal government, make true on delivering monies, now you can put conditions on those monies, but that's the key, delivering the monies that were allocated for those states, you might be okay. If he gets to do it without, the thing is the conditions, and you're going to run into public schools that were promised money and that are being denied because they're teaching climate change or whatever. You might run into different problems. Reuters says a U.S. judge will not block Elon Musk from firing federal workers accessing data. And like I said, all these suits are coming from states, from liberal groups in states, from liberal states and cities that are stopping the purge of the U.S. federal government. But the majority of the electorate wants this to happen. The main reason, what people say on the street, is the reason is that the people would rather get that money. So the main reasoning of the electorate is, hey man, send that money over here. What's making the electorate mad is that all this money is being sent and spent to other countries and other peoples other than Americans. And so they can't wrap their head around that. They can't reconcile that. Like, why we have all this debt, but we're spending money on other countries. And a lot of those things are frivolous. And even uneducated rubes, whether they're urban or rural, know what frivolity is. Next up is just the news. Majority of Americans believe federal judges abusing their power is a threat to democracy. Rasmussen poll published Tuesday found that the majority of Americans believe that federal judges who abuse their power pose a threat to democracy, echoing Arizona GOP Representative Eli Crane. He's the former Special Forces guy. So Crane made the comment when announcing that he was drafting articles of impeachment against the federal judge who blocked the Department of Government Efficiency from accessing Treasury Department payment records. Even though the judge recently reversed herself, because it's a stay or an injunction while the judge takes a closer look at the thing. So you had AOC saying, oh, it's a victory. It wasn't. A judge will often put a stay or an injunction on something while she determines her verdict. So in any case, Rasmussen poll conducted last week found that 56 of respondents agreed with the sentiment, including 35% strongly agree. Just 36% said they disagree with Crane's observation. And as I mentioned earlier, the electorate approves of the government being audited in the hopes that some of that found money will be spent domestically. When they floated the idea that they're going to send refund checks to people, to taxpayers around the United States with all this found DOGE money, people like that idea a lot. So that backs up my point that the reasoning is where the money is spent, and we know it's through fraud, cronyism mostly, because the criminals in the government who really suck most of the money out of the government are known by the government. So let that sink in. Like I said, it's not a welfare mom, using her dead mother's social security number to get a little extra social security. That's not what the majority of fraud goes to, unnamed accounts for billions of dollars. CNN Politics. Senior DOJ prosecutor quit after being told to investigate Biden climate spending. So, and we're going to get to something else in just a second, which is equally as important. So, the rats are fleeing the sinking ship because, like I said, a lot of the DOJ are liberal and they're not quitting for ethical reasons or for ideological reasons. They're quitting because they understand where the fraud is. So they're not going to, if they're a Democrat, they're not going to willingly investigate a crime that's going to come back on the Democratic Party. Just the News is reporting bill in Congress would allow for more prosecutions of unemployment benefit fraudsters. Well, yeah. The fact is that the liberals and the Democrats, the progressives, were mostly, oh, these people are poor, they shouldn't be punished. They were just trying to get ahead. What does this mean necessarily? Anybody committing fraud, and I think a lot of it has to do with the unemployment benefit fraudsters, has to do with federal money's going to states and the states paying out to unemployment fraudsters. This usually includes people that work and commit and collect unemployment. So I think that's a good thing. The reason being is that federal tax dollars go to states to shore up unemployment. The story goes on to say an Illinois congressman is calling for the adoption of legislation that would allow more time to pursue COVID-19 pandemic era unemployment insurance fraudsters. So it's more than just unemployment insurance, which even got me to not cringe a little bit, but if you're fired, your company pays, you're fired. You're fired if you're let go from your company pays into unemployment insurance, and so you're due that money regardless. Now, during COVID was a way different thing, and I'm going to get into that right now. The Pandemic Unemployment Fraud Enforcement Act would provide a 5-year extension on the statute of limitations for criminally prosecuting those who stole unemployment benefits. During the recent Ways and Means Work and Welfare Subcommittee hearing, Work and Welfare Chairman Darren LaHood, Republican of Illinois, shared details of recent conviction in Pennsylvania of a man who stole $59 million in public benefits, including unemployment, and funneled the funds to his co-conspirators in China. Well, there you go. Like I said, I'm not talking about the guy that is working under the table while collecting unemployment to make ends meet. I'm talking about a guy, and these are schemes, large multi-million-dollar fraud schemes, which involved this guy who was in league with the communist Chinese. All right, moving on to another story. This is kind of important for the simple reason is in a macro or a global geopolitical sense, it's important to understand the conservative nature of the revolt against the global liberal order. And the next article is from the New York Times. Trump Media Group sues Brazilian judge weighing arrest of Jair Bolsonaro. The lawsuit came hours after the justice received an indictment of Brazil's former president, who is an ally of President Trump. Now, we see this around the world, and particularly in Brazil, because Lula da Silva is a communist who was sent to prison for corruption and whose record was wiped clean so he could run for president again. and what was seen as a fraudulent election where he defeated also a very popular Jair Bolsonaro. And much like January 6th, the Brazilians rose up and stormed the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has more power than presidents in Brazil. So now, the AP is reporting Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, is charged over alleged coup that included a plan to poison Lula. Now there was an alleged coup that included a plan to poison Lula. This seems they have trumped up so many bogus charges against Jair Bolsonaro, it'll make your head spin. And the reason is that China and the global liberal elite don't want Brazil to be led by a conservative reformist. But people liked Bolsonaro for what he did. So the conservatives globally need a chance. We'll see if Bolsonaro will get another term in Brazil. Because his rise really mirrored Trump. He also survived an attempted assassination, also, like Trump. But that was before he was elected the first time. New York Post, Washington Post kills six-figure ad calling for Trump to fire Elon Musk, fueling outcry over censorship. Well, what we saw here was the fact that the Washington Post was going to air an ad, six-figure ad, so $1 million ad, that called for Trump to fire Elon Musk. And that's when they thought they were behind a liberal headwind, or the headwind the liberals had created, outrage over Musk. But as the Rasmussen poll showed, is that, and many other polls show, is that people like what Elon Musk is doing. And so they canceled the ad because they don't have the popular support. And that's democracy. You need popular support to survive politically. Getting into some other recent news here. If you didn't hear that Marco Rubio went to Saudi Arabia to meet with his Russian counterparts. And the Associated Press is reporting Russia and U.S. agree to work towards ending Ukraine war in a remarkable diplomatic shift. We all thank God for that, because everybody realizes that we were headed towards World War III, and that's very disturbing. So, trying to carry out a war of attrition between Europe, NATO, West, and Russia, which is, NATO has never changed its mission statement, which was to undermine, however they can, politically and otherwise, the state of Russia. I guess the goal is regime change. Semaphore is reporting key Russian official praises very positive talks with the U.S. And the BBC reports Zelensky says Trump is living in disinformation space created by Russia. I think he's living in a disinformation space created by cocaine. Zelensky is just parroting what the West, the liberal West, has been saying, which is Russia propaganda is convincing people that, they deserve some sort of consideration when drawing up a peace deal. Now, I just watched this thing with, David Sachs and Tucker Carlson just recently. I think it came out yesterday. So David Sachs is a geopolitical economist, And he outlaid some very basic truths about the war in Ukraine and Russia and the West's and NATO's stance towards Russia for some time. So the fact that people within the foreign policy establishment or Zelensky or anybody in Europe could talk to the global population or the American population for that matter and say that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was an unprovoked aggression, which everybody knows that to be completely false. Look up Orange Revolution. That was another revolution that failed in Ukraine, a color revolution that failed in Ukraine in 2007. You can start there if you want to pull on that string. New York Post is reporting Elon Musk says stranded International Space Station astronauts were left up there for political reasons by Biden. And this was part of the interview with Sean Hannity on Fox, where Musk and Trump sat there and answered some pretty softball questions. But Musk did say there that he was supposed to get the astronauts that were stranded up there for complicated reasons, because the ship that was supposed to be damaged returned into orbit and back to Earth without any problems. They were worried it was going to blow up. So they said, we have to bring back the rocket without the astronauts, left them up there. And now Musk is going to go get them, but that operation had been stalled by the Biden administration, and now it's going to take place under the Trump administration. I would be careful, though, because Musk's SpaceX operations have been sabotaged many times as of late, particularly since he bought X or Twitter, and also since he started supporting Donald Trump. The Federalist is reporting Democrats' beef isn't with executive power, it's with Trump and his voters. So if you didn't understand what this is, and I've said it many times, is the Democrats have buttressed and increased and really turned the executive into a dictator. And both the establishment Republicans and the Democrats have been doing this for years, because then they put in their puppet and there's no counter from Congress, which is really the will of the people. So that's why they worried so much about Trump getting elected president, not just the first time, but the second time, because they increase the power of the executive. And then if the people get an executive in there, then the game is up. The jig is up, so to speak. And that's what's happening. So I'm going to go over this really quickly. Democrats' history of expanding presidential power. And it goes through the history, Lyndon Johnson and the Vietnam War and FDR and Truman and Wilson going back to the turn of the 20th century. It's been going on for years. And they didn't have a problem with it even when Barack Obama was elected. Hillary Clinton. The Democrats don't have problems with executive power. They put it there on purpose. So when they get their guy in, they could do things that are legislatively questionable. But the power is there now, and so whether it's tax law or anything else, once it's legal, well, it's legal. So, and then they question it ethically. Well, is it right? It doesn't matter. It's legal. It's like when I was part of the media union and I'd argue for things in a contract, and then I'd exploit those things, those rights that were given to employees during a contract, and other employees were looking at me going, why, how come you can do that? I go, well, it's in the contract. And they go, well, it's not fair. And I go, well, it's in the contract. So it is fair. I go, you can do it too. It's like with rights, like individual rights. People don't, you use or you stand behind and use your individual rights, and people say, hey, you can't do that. Yeah, I can. It's my right. Now, how far do you push your rights? Then you get into an ethical quandary. Speaking of ethical quandaries, the Post-Millennial is reporting MSNBC historian calls to cancel President's Day because we don't want to celebrate all presidents. I'm not sure we really want to celebrate all presidents, she says. Then it goes on to describe the encounter, which if you saw it is just ridiculous because she's a historian and she's a young woman. So, okay, when I was growing up, Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday, there were two different federal holidays. So they just combined them into President's Day. So, but it was honoring Washington and Lincoln. It wasn't all presidents. So somewhere along the line, someone might have said, hey, it's to honor all presidents, or maybe when they switched. But originally it was to celebrate Washington and Lincoln. So it's not all presidents. But she went on to say, it says, way too early host on MSNBC, Ali Vitali, asked presidential historian Linda Chervinsky if she wanted to completely scrap the holiday, to which Chervinsky responded, it's a little bit silly. I mean, we have had some real duds, so I'm not sure we really want to be celebrating all presidents. And as I just mentioned, it's not all presidents. It's Lincoln and Washington, but it was too confusing. There was too many holidays in February. And it was really once Martin Luther King Jr. became a federal holiday. Then we had 3 federal holidays in February. It didn't make any sense. So they just made Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday just one holiday, and they called it President's Day. The Federalist is reporting leftist-led Wisconsin Supreme Court ruling guts challenges to election law violation. So this is part of what I said originally. It's really the global left, but the left in the United States also is digging in their heels. So they want to stop the march of conservatism, populist conservatism, and they're going to do it by hook or crook. And so in Wisconsin, they're going to decide, and this might surely get rid of Ron Johnson for good, is they're going to gut challenges to election law violations. So, and that's what they tried to do around the country is, this is the electoral count. This is the vote. We're not going to look at discrepancies or how many people voted or any of that. We're just going to take the amount of ballots we get in, we're going to count those, and that's it. And we'll count them at our leisure and in hiding and whatever. No one could see. And we'll be like California. We'll take 6 months to count the vote. And whatever verdict we come up with, you can't challenge. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yeah, I'm getting some clipping. I think it's my noise gate here, so. PJ Media is reporting, evidently, Lindsey Graham doesn't understand the Trump mandate. If you didn't know what was going on, him and Tillis and John Cornyn of Texas traveled to Europe to attend the Munich Security Conference. That's the one where J.D. Vance spoke. And while they were there, they met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. During his meeting, the 3 senators pledged their support for Ukraine in its ongoing war against Russia. But none more so than Graham. And he's a chicken hawk. He's a war hawk. He always has been. He's in the pocket of military-industrial complex. And although he said some great things, and he said, full-throatedly put his support behind Trump, that just makes him an astute politician that, he was never backing the mandate of the U.S. electorate, including people in his state, that was against war. Going back to Argentina, Semaphore is reporting Argentina's president Javier Milei faces probe over cryptocurrency crash. Excuse me. I always say Javier. It's Javier Milei. And so he's had a lot of success in his austerity crash and burn. So basically what DOGE is doing is mimicking what they did in Argentina, which is going line by line, agency by agency, cutting out the things that weren't needed. Because Argentina was facing triple-digit inflation. Triple-digit, not double-digit, triple-digit inflation. New York Post reports Elon Musk's, I went over that already, excuse me. Just the News is reporting bill would eliminate property taxes for Illinois homeowners after 30 years of residence or residency. I wish this would come to Connecticut. In Mexico, when you hit 65, your property taxes are cut in half. And some places like Belize, they don't have any property tax at all. So I always thought when I was a kid that when you pay off your house, you pay off your mortgage, and you had your house. But it's hard to cover property taxes, especially when you become retired, you have limited income, et cetera, et cetera. So most people, their house is paid for, but once they hit retirement, they got to sell their house. I mean, which is fine to the extent of it was the number one way Americans built wealth, is over the course of 30 years, they paid off their mortgage of their house, and then they had a few $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, whatever. And so that's wealth. That's money, real money. So you could sell your house and have that money. But for older people that wanted to stay in their house, they either had to get a reverse mortgage or, figure out, if they didn't have an income stream, figure out some way to pay all the taxes. So I think it would be a great idea for people following this bill that have had 30 years of residency in the home. So I guess you'd have to live in the same home for 30 years. That doesn't make a lot. Oh. Yeah, that's weird. That keeps getting clipped there. In any case, I think it's a good idea. But I think once you hit 65, maybe you could apply for certain things. If you're strained economically, that you could apply for, and this is already a law in most states, if you didn't know, if you're over 65 and you're having difficulty paying your taxes, you can apply for a tax rebate, incentive, etc., to get your taxes cut. Next story up is from Barron's, a digital detox. Young adults flock to London offline nights. And this is about a lot of young people have moved to get away from smartphones and social media, I think because they were raised on it. And I think it's a great idea because, to be honest with you, life as a young person was great without technology. A transistor radio, or we had those boom boxes, those tape decks, cassette tape decks. That was great because you could take your music everywhere. It was before the Walkman, which is the first, before iPods, the first earplug thing. There's a cassette player with earplugs from Sony. In any case, it was great to live your life without this without staring into an emotional control device, a manipulating mind control device, which has you trained like a Pavlovian dog. Bing, bing, ooh, I got a like, ooh, I got this, ooh, I got that. Not good for you emotionally, and your emotions and your intellect are one and the same or combined. So anything that affects you emotionally can affect your intellect, and vice versa. So digital detox is a great idea. That's why I advocate for camping for people. Everybody should go out and go camping. Leave your phone in the car and sit by the fire, play guitar, whatever. Whatever. I'm going to have to change that. There's this new filter I added, and plus the noise gate is set the way the noise gate is set, and this new filter I added, it's not compatible. So it's clipping me at the low end. So if I talk like slow, not picking up. PJ Media is reporting, here's why Trump's border czar is threatening to put FBI agents in jail. All right, this Tom Homan article. Oh, we're past already. All right, just to finish up here. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, is threatening to put FBI agents in jail. And he's talking specifically about the people who leak. All right, moving a little quickly now. New York Post, reputed Trendaragua gangsters nabbed in New York City felony drug raid, only to be cut loose with a slap on the wrist. So New York is up to their old tricks. One American News, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announces new transnational multi-million-dollar ad campaign targeting illegal aliens and people that want to migrate to this country illegally. Washington Times, Palantir goes off script to reveal ambitious agenda, real reason for TikTok ban. CEO Karp, in his new book, urges peers to support union of state software industry and the fact that this is fascism. Should be no union of state and industry. State is to police industry, and industry, in its ability, should be able to sell to the federal government, which is the people. So if the defense industry needs something from SpaceX or from Elon Musk, they should be able to buy it, or Palantir, they should be able to buy it. But there should be no union of industry and state. That's fascism. That's why corporations shouldn't be able to contribute politically to campaigns. 704, Montana seeks ban to mRNA shots as vaccine hesitancy soars. With good reason. Zero Hedge, Trevor Noah suggests integration of black and white people was a mistake. Of course he says that. If you didn't know anything about Trevor Noah is a bad South African comedian who is an asset, or could very well be an agent of the CIA. He's a propaganda specialist, and now that he's out from The Daily Show, he's now out on circuit saying that, you know, the integration of black and white people was a mistake, so blacks listening to this will become even more divided from people of other color, whites in America. Speaking of racial division, PJ Media is reporting Wicked star to set to play Jesus Christ. And if you didn't know who this was, if you didn't know the recent movie, Wiz, the recent Wiz movie that she got such acclaim, which I said was a transference of racial animus to putting a black actor as the evil witch who was green, and supposedly she was ostracized because she was green, and actually that's a transference of blacks and black skin African Americans. So the original play played on that a little bit, but it wasn't so as evident as it is in the motion picture, where she obviously has black facial features, so the transference is complete. Now you're taking a black woman and you're making her a star. You're making her Jesus Christ in Jesus Christ Superstar, the play. So they're going to remake the play, and this time Jesus isn't only going to be black, which is debatable, I suppose, but Jesus Christ is going to be a woman. So we'll see how that transpires. I went a little long today. I kept having these issues. This mic was a little more complicated to figure out, especially once I put the inline amp in. So I was getting an overdriven mic and I couldn't figure it out. So it has to do with the filters, the audio processing, how it's used, and in this case with the noise gate. So when I start talking a little softly, it seemed to clip a little bit. So in any case, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack biologically, psychologically. Stay hip to that trick. And I'll see you tomorrow. I'm feeling a little bit better. Didn't have a Tuesdays with Perry last night because my office is so fucking cold, and I'm suffering from this sinus infection. So we might have one tonight. So stay tuned for that. If we do, it will go live at 9:15. All right. Thanks for joining me. See you later. Respect.
You can't handle the truth.
This is all a conspiracy. Don't you know that it's a conspiracy?